Alright, so we're back with the 2500 HD. So I went down to Michael's yesterday and we spent some time going over this thing and getting it dialed in from the cylinder head change and the fuel system change. So the first thing we noticed was it was a lot leaner, richer in the old tune versus the new tune. So I don't want to say how much percent it was because come to find out, my wideband, which is an Innovate LC1 or LC2, I believe it has the same formula in HP tuners. But so I put another bung in and had it all wired up, and we were logging off of mine. And I have an MPVI2 ProLink with it plugs in the side of it, and I don't know why HP tuners did that. It's garbage. Having that little connector on the side, because you got typically the OBD2 port on these trucks is right above the parking brake, and I destroyed mine one day because I went to push the parking brake down and broke the connection where the ProLink goes into the MPVI2. Had to buy another ProLink, and then after all that, you still have to wiggle that connector to try to get it to pick up and log, and it's a mess. So anyway, the times it was reading, it was showing really rich, and so we pulled some fuel out and everything, and then something happened and we ended up having to bench flash it. So I don't know, COM or a CAN bus or whatever. The 03, I think, was the first year that I don't know if it's CAN bus, I don't remember what it is, but anyway, the serial data, maybe that's what it is, the serial data was different on these than the earlier ones. So I don't know, but it kept pausing on its scanner, and we pulled the radio fuse because sometimes that'll interfere. I've had them not right before because the radio fuse was in with an aftermarket radio. So we went and got his wideband, which is a very nice high dollar wideband, and put it in there. And again, he was like, I'm just gonna write a new table for this thing, new fuel table. So he made one up, and then he was very close. I think 0.02 off, and so it was pretty accurate. So he does enough of them. He knows what it needs to be, and I wasn't gonna tell him the background of what I had done. So anyway, it was another Easter egg, I guess. But he got it running a lot better with that thing. And then a problem we were having was coming into boost, it would command 1 lambda, but the actual would be 0.8, and because the commanded didn't match the actual, or whatever background math or whatever it's doing, it knows it should, or it wants to be at 1, so it's doing whatever it can. So you could see the squiggles on the line where it was trying to lean it out because it thought it wanted to be at 1 lambda. So anyway, again, another Easter egg, I guess. There's just more stuff in there on these drive-by-wire trucks that I didn't have maxed out or disabled or whatever. So the way he caught it was watching the log, and it actually showed some sort of mass airflow rate, which obviously all we have is inlet air temp. So it picked up I forget what, 6 grams per second, or I don't know what the units are for the mass airflow, because I don't ever use it, because somebody asked that. These are all my stuff's in SD. With the Caprice, we tried to do mass airflow and have it phase 2 speed density. He thought it would switch, but it didn't, so we ended up having to do it in speed density too. So all my stuff's on speed density. That's how I've always done it, and we run them in closed loop. So we have an O2 in the crossover, and we have an O2 in the downpipe. And if you go under injectors and HP tuners, you can switch everything where it only reads off of that one sensor and makes changes globally across all the injectors, so you don't have bank 1, bank 2 anymore. It's just off the downpipe. So that's how all these are set up. So he put that fuel map in there, got it close, and then he turned off those other things so we didn't have any erroneous mass airflow values just out of nowhere. And then the other thing is now that it was running so much better, again, these are 80-pound decas. The percent, it was 1% at idle on the duty cycle, I guess. So what we had to do again was go in there. It's the last tab on the fuel page. The transient, I believe, we had 0.029, or I had 0.029 in it. So on the quadra-steer, he had to do this too, because I had 100-pound injectors on the quadra-steer, and with the stock cam and everything, the injectors couldn't get down to a low enough pulse width or duty cycle to achieve the air-fuel ratio we wanted at idle. So he went in and zeroed that out, and then he halved some other value on the injector data, and then it leaned it out. I think it was an 11, 12, 11 and a half maybe air-fuel ratio at idle. And then once he put I think the air tables were pretty much stock value, so he was able to put that back to stock, and then got the fuel injectors. Once we turned the transient to 0 and then half those other values, then it leaned it out to about 16, and then that's when he ended up making the new table. And then he said the VE looked like what he was more used to seeing. So anyway, got that right, got the fueling right. I think he pulled 5 degrees initial out of the timing table from the old setup, or the previous setup from this with the rec port heads. We pulled 5 degrees out and then drove it to get the fueling right. Once we got the fueling right, he sprinkled some more timing back in it. I don't know how much total timing we ended up on, but we were having an issue with the boost controller where at part throttle, just rolling into it, it kind of had like a fluttering type, surging type deal, and he said that he noticed that on his, but when you went wide open, it did perfect, and came up, plateaued, and worked fine. But just the part throttle, it would just kind of had a flutter. So I had this thing sprung for 10 pounds, so we ended up taking the boost controller out and just running it vacuum to the bottom of the gate, and I think it was making 189 or something like that, or no, 180, somewhere around in there. 180, 190 kPa is what we ended up on. And then, like I say, whatever timing he could stick back into it, and it pulls a lot stronger bottom end. So I drove it to Summit after I got the truck together, which is probably 50 miles maybe from my house one way, so 100 miles round trip. I put some miles on it, and then it's 60 miles from my house to his shop. So I wanted to get the 150 miles on the converter, you know, for the break-in period. So we got that. We had well over 150 miles on it when we went to doing wide open throttle pulls and everything. And like I say, initially we were just kind of rolling into it and watching the fuel, cruise, air fuel ratio and stuff like that. And like I say, I mean, I'm happy with it. The bottom end, it is a lot more stout on bottom end now. So I don't know how much more is left in it. If we can maybe squeak another pound or two of boost in, but I don't think it'll really matter. It's like I say, it runs well enough as it is that like I was talking about in the other video, you know, when I come up to a hill, you just barely have to get on it and it'll pull up the hill. And you know, the power's there. You don't have the lag per se of when you give the throttle response from when you give it throttle to when it actually comes into power and starts moving. So I'm happy with that. Let's see what else was there. I can't remember what else there was, but oh, the vacuum. So I noticed right off the bat when this thing running, the vacuum was 18 or 20 inches of vacuum at idle. And when we were driving, Michael was saying that, you know, this thing was getting into cells on the VE table that it hadn't gotten to before with any of the other setups. So these heads, like I say, I did some bowl work on them, cleaned them up, and I lapped all the valves. And you know, I don't know if there was a problem with the 823 heads or what the deal is, but you know, I was very impressed with how much vacuum it pulled, because you know, normally they only pull about 10 inches or 12 or something like that, but like I say, with it pulling close to 20 inches of vacuum, you know, when you're going down the road, it's way down in vacuum, so that really should help fuel mileage. So I think that's where I was going when I was talking about going to Summit. So I went to Summit, came back, and then did some through town driving, and then drove to his shop, which I had to take a little bit of interstate and then mostly back roads, 60 mile an hour back roads. And then I did have a little Coyote Mustang. Thought I was going too slow, and then wasn't able to come around me, so I think he was a little bit surprised by that. I would have given him a little bit more had it been tuned, but with the timing in it and it not being tuned, I wasn't about to really get into some boost with the guy. But it was kind of comical just to have a Mustang come up on you and then, you know, not be able to pull on a 4-door 2500. So but anyway, so it got after I got down to Michael's, we drove it, you know, we did several pulls and everything, getting everything dialed in, and then I topped off leaving again because it's 60 miles back to my house. And when I'm in a turbo vehicle, I don't like to be below a half a tank ever. I always want to make sure I got a half a tank, because it was funny when I drove down there a week or two ago in my wife's car, it was just above a half a tank when I left, and I think when we got back it was just below a half a tank. So a normal vehicle compared to this, you know, it ended up getting 11.5 miles a gallon, and like I say, that was before it was tuned for this setup. And you know, hopefully it'll be a lot better. I'll keep you posted on the mileage, because that's one of my big things is the fuel mileage of these setups, because I really like the quadra steer. I keep going back to that. I really like the quadra steer. It's a good setup, stock cam, and just 78, 75. I mean, it's just an impressive combo. And I mean, don't get me wrong, this thing's pretty fast, but you know, it doesn't get 14 miles a gallon and it's not just instant. It's still not as instant as I want it to be. And like I say, I think a cam change would probably help that. But again, I really don't want to. I don't want to do that again. So anyway, big thanks to Michael for letting me come down yesterday and go over it with me and get it dialed in again. And it's good to have my truck back. I don't know how long this converter will last or whatever, but it's in there, and I really can't tell that much of a difference from the 2200 stall to the 2500 stall. But with the change cylinder head and all that, it really pulls pretty strong. We got some good clean pulls out of it yesterday, and had finished up that Mustang up there, so I'm about to go drive it, and I got to get a short belt for it to bypass the smog pump, because it's that original. And then once I get that out of here, then I'm going to put the Caprice on the rack and pull the turbos off and get the transmission out and start trying to fit the 6L90 and trying to get that thing back together so we can take it back down to Michael and try to get it dialed in with the Circle D and the 6L90. And he was saying that he thinks they'll probably put down some more power having a good converter in it and all, and he probably wouldn't have pushed it as hard as he did had he known that I had a Summit Pro LS converter in it. But I gotta give it credit though. It held up and lasted a lot longer than I thought it would. Versus say this $1,700 triple disc that lasted a few months. That one was on borrowed time from the onset. So anyway, that's enough for now.